Gay programming.
What it is. Welcome to another episode of the greatest nuclear mysticism podcast on the internet. It is gay programming. Back at it again. Back in the saddle like the Wild West. Bang, bang. We are taking the frontier once again. But I'm not alone. As always. I'm joined by my lovely co-host / life partner, Merlin Kirby. How you doing?
I'm still riding the high from getting the fan to work.
Oh yeah,
over the weekend,
we've been doing some repairs on our van since we've gotten back from our little vacation that we had, like our week vacation, and we're getting back to working on just back to life stuff. But we were working on the van, and you're definitely riding on some highs because you're a fucking technician.
I'm a genius.
A mad wire fiend. Someone who can hook up a bomb and probably send it to someone. So watch out. Watch out, haters. Boom, boom.
I mean, if I Googled it, I probably could.
Yeah, probably. I mean, anybody can. That information's out there just, like, for anyone. It's a fucking crazy world.
Don't use that information.
Technically, they can't sue us because that's just public domain information that anybody has. So, I don't want to hear nothing about it. But regardless, we're not here to talk about our very obvious hobby of bomb making.
I'm out.
We're here to catch you up on some big news that's been happening, because plenty of fucking news has been happening all the while we've been dead on the air. But we're back to cover some of the stuff, and I thought the first thing on the agenda that definitely just about anyone in a political-centric podcast that we kind of are, whatever we are, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the midterms, or especially I wanted to talk a little bit about the midterms. What's your view on the results and everything? Which, essentially, if you haven't seen, the results are jack shit. Nothing fucking happened.
Well, that was when you were asking me what my thoughts were. I was going to just be like, I think it went bad. Except for, like, I saw some good shit of, like, oh, there's an openly trans Congress member now, and I'm kind of like, cool, but also all this other atrocious shit happened that nobody's talking about.
Leading up to Tuesday, it was basically everybody wondering, okay, is there going to be a red wave? Is there going to be just a huge amount of, like, Congress, like, MAGA fucking conservatives getting elected all over the state? Is this going to be the end of the Democrats in all places? Has Dark Brandon finally gone a step too far by giving a small little student loan payout to some people? And essentially the answer came back with no. They did not show up. No, there was no red wave. And, you know, before Democrats are all, like, you know, skipping and doodling around their fucking, like, supposed pot of gold, as in they didn't lose the seats they thought they were going to lose, they shouldn't be happy either, because there wasn't a fucking show up for them either. Because both parties seem to be at a perfect point to have their base get riled up and then show up at the polls, and then some, like, you know, big, huge swing was going to happen. And on the end of the conservatives, they thought it was going to be like, oh, we're going to push the anti-trans and critical race theory. Basically everything we've been talking about, like, through our conservative media streams to, like, get our base really hyped on. And because of our success on Roe versus Wade of overturning it, we're going to get, like, big show up. That didn't occur. That didn't happen. And the same happened with, like, fucking Democrats, where, you know, you would hope that because of the overturning on Roe versus Wade, there would be a big show up of Democrats. But that shit didn't fly because, really, I think most of the Democrats didn't even run mostly on Planned Parenthood or abortion rights or anything like that. They were mostly concerned about defending democracy, whatever the fuck that means. And it just shows that that message didn't really resonate with anyone, so they just kind of had normal show-ups. Probably the most who showed up were people who were scared of conservatives getting these seats or whatever. But past that, they didn't really attract anyone to, like, show up big numbers and take seats. They just defended their seats, what they had, and gained one. So, yeah, awesome job. Great spending of, like, whatever amount of millions and millions of, like, campaign funds to have a fucking lackluster show like this, where like nothing happened. We're all just waiting 2 years from now to see who gets the big kahuna job.
I feel like there's been kind of an increased realization, again, with something as big as Roe v. Wade being overturned, despite the obvious numbers showing that the American public did not desire that.
Yeah, and that the basis of them overturning it came through the most undemocratic part of the legislation.
Yeah, no, so I think it is kind of, there's this message being sent of like, you cannot stop oppression with the tools that the oppressor gives you.
Yeah, and it comes right down to a representative like democracy where the whole point is like you got to get your player character ready, and you got to get all the NPCs to support that player character. I'm gamifying politics for you fucking losers. Basically, Democrats are always fucking like shocked and appalled when they're like, man, none of the NPCs came to us, even though we do fucking nothing for them, other than shame them for not supporting us. Even though, again, the only message we were really pushing was
get out there and vote, or I will motherfucking kill you.
Granted, there were some politicians, at least especially in our local, where like the governor with like Tina Kotek, I think her last name is, where her big pitch was like, I'm the only candidate that's supported by Planned Parenthood. I support abortion. I'm against this overturning of Roe versus Wade. So there was, I'm sure there were other similar campaigns. I know John Fetterman from Pennsylvania was big on like saying he supported abortion, and he won. So I definitely think the politicians who used that definitely took advantage of a certain population who does want to see some change against that, and at least sees the potential in change supporting people who say like, oh, on their thing, I support Planned Parenthood, I support abortions, I'm for Roe versus Wade, etc., etc. But like as a national message, that was not a fucking part of the Democratic messaging. It was like, because if you just look at everything Barack Obama was saying as he was going all across the country touring and helping people, it was always keeps going back, or at least the highlight everybody was rolling with was this defending democracy. We can't let the January 6th riots go in vain. That sent a strong message that there are some people who, you know, the MAGA degenerates are going to take over the country, and that's why you need to show up. It's not, we don't have any fucking plan for the future, but we do know that our precious white buildings must not be stormed upon.
Yeah.
That's literally it, and that was their messaging. And, you know, granted, I'm sure there are a lot of fucking suburban white people who list themselves as Democrats did show up to the polls because of that. And there was probably a lot of Democrats who showed up because of that. But at the end of the day, you're just not going to attract a winning national message off of just fear-mongering among your base. And that's a critique not even with the Democratic Party, but I think a little bit of the Conservative Party, where I think they're a little bit blinded by the MAGA magic that they struck in 2016 by basically like letting their dick accidentally flop out their fucking fly by letting Donald Trump take the office. But they found a certain magic that they like hadn't found in a little bit, and it was like in the modern time where they really could just lure their base and attract people who were never usually voting people to come out and support Trump for whatever fucking thing he said was the problem today. And I think they're a little bit still thinking that they can muster up that magic. And I think, especially now with the midterms, it's showing as a national message, it's really not super successful. Like, again, it keeps your base, so you have your like little places that you still hold, but you know, you're not going to have the red wave that they keep thinking is going to happen, because their message doesn't pertain to anyone outside their fucking party.
On one hand, there's definitely like the fear that is there of like the psycho neo-Nazis that are out in the streets like threatening to kill people. But at the same time, yeah, like at least on like a legal political sense, like I feel like that's just not going to happen, because I think especially in these days, like everyone who partakes in, well, not everyone, but a lot of people who partake in the whole like watching politics and seeing what's happening, I feel are generally very kind of moderate centrist people, because everyone else is like in the streets losing their mind, whether they're extreme left or extreme right. So yeah, as far as voting goes, I do feel like
Broke our table.
I broke our table.
And that's America, and that's America under conservative leadership. We must defend democracy.
It's true. No, so I feel like that's why we keep getting these like lackluster vote things, is because like the majority of like suburban people who are voting are
The
just
one third of Americans who actually show up because they're losers to vote.
Yeah, no, like they're the ones who don't want any kind of radical extreme change, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they certainly don't want progressive change, and I mean, even those people, like, again, their involvement with politics is very face value. Like, anything that pertains in their, like, because again, like, another thing that was really interesting is like what was everybody saying their major concern was before this midterms. It was the same thing they've been saying for the last like 80 billion years, is the economy and crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their major concerns. Now, even those people who say that's their major concern aren't even directly affected in most times. Like, they're fine in their fucking suburbs, and yeah, maybe some payments might be a little bit like late or something, but especially if you're a registered voter in the suburb, you're doing just fucking fine financially, and also are safeguarded because of like how you plan cities and everything from like really serious amounts of crime. Like, you're just not going to see that in fucking like Orange County suburbs because of just how fucking far they are from the rest of the city. And also, they're very controlled and very, very monitored and made sure that they stay in that way. So, you know, these people who are participating in the political infrastructure don't really have any want to have anything changed because their life is pretty good. And the only thing that they can be ever led to in politics is, again, what the Democratic Party says is either defend democracy, or the conservatives saying the trans are trying to rape your kids. So you basically pick your poison as a suburban of which one you want to say is the main problem, and then you go to the polls and vote for the guy who has the D or the R based off of what you fear. Again, like I said, I joke, but the 1/3 of Americans who actually show up to vote is that there's 2/3 of Americans who aren't a part of the democratic process, because again, we have shit like we have election days on a fucking work week on Tuesday.
And voter suppression.
And just the fucking legislative hoops that a lot of fucking people have put to prevent people from showing up to the polls, both conservative and Democrat, liberal and conservative. The people who actually have a void, or actually have problems that need to be addressed through massive infrastructure or a massive shift in priorities, can't participate in the thing that might actually influence that change, partially because that's kind of how the House of Cards was built. Mm-hmm. And how it's supposed to be built. But yeah, I mean, it's just really this midterm shows fucking nothing other than that both of the parties they're not even really politicians anymore. They're just people who are bureaucrats shifting their fucking positions and shifting their fucking messaging to just keep in power. Whatever it is, whatever I have to say to keep in power.
Like glorified influencers.
Yeah, honestly. And it's I mean, I guess we can't wait to see what happens in 2 years from now. It's going to be a fucking bloodbath, I'm sure. Maybe it will be like this and be nothing and signify nothing.
Yeah.
I wanted to focus a little bit on what's happening here at home, because if people who are familiar with our previous episodes, we have we're from Portland, Oregon, and because of that, we are definitely very interested in the humanitarian crisis that is occurring here and many other parts of the world, but is in a fucking massive capital of misery in a way with Portland, Oregon, in regards to homelessness and houseless people. We have talked a little bit about our mayor, our piece of shit mayor, by the name of Ted Wheeler, aka Tevis, and he's been making some moves around in the city. So yeah, maybe if you're comfortable, can you kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of what the current situation is in Tevis's administration and his regards to homelessness and how he plans to quote unquote solve it?
Gosh, yeah, so I have not been completely up to date on the most recent developings. Last I remember,
Well, to a certain degree. I mean, we've definitely, even just living in the city, have seen a noticeable change.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean recent developings as far as where this particular plan has been for the last 2 weeks. So, he's got this weird, creepy, suspicious everything but goal to build these camps, and he's even asked, do you remember who he asked for funding? And they were like, no.
Well, he asked for Oregon and some other mayors essentially for funding.
He asked for funding for these camps.
Because I remember this, that
Yeah.
there are 3 set locations that are supposedly going to be outdoor locations that will allow campers.
Mm-hmm. And he asked for a lot of funding for this, and he was like, oh yeah, every single homeless person's gonna have a spot, even though there's estimated 700 plus camps in Portland, Oregon, and only 3 locations for these shelters. And he asked for some funding, and the other people were like, this is a really vague, poorly planned out request. We don't know what you're doing exactly, so no, we're not gonna give you money. The thing that's really, really weird about it is that if a person were to refuse to be swept and moved into one of these 3 locations,
except going into one of their facilities that they have their shelters.
That's illegal under this new goal and means imprisonment, which is all kinds of fucked up. And there was even a local historian who I wish I remembered the name of, but I don't, so take it, who commented that the messaging Ted Wheeler is using about how, these facilities are going to help them. They don't know how much they need our help. This is good for them. Yes, we're fining them and putting them in jail if they refuse our help, but no, they need it. It's good. It's very similar to the messaging Hitler and the Nazi Party used about the Jews. That doesn't raise any red flags, but more specifically, we live vaguely close to a lovely little park in Portland, Oregon, one of many, called Laurelhurst Park.
A street that separates the park into 2 distinct sections.
Yeah.
And along that, especially where the parks are between the 2, there used to be just basically from the beginning of that street until the very end and even further were just dotted camps, and especially near the front of that street was just decorated in tents.
Yeah, always lovely people, and that area would get swept every so often, and then they come back, and then it would get swept again, and they come back, because where the fuck else are they gonna go? Mm-hmm. But recently, Tevis was like, I'm tired of this cat and mouse, I'm fixing this street once and for all. So they put out, they didn't even really tell the campers, which is illegal, because they're supposed to get 24 hours notice before a sweep, and they weren't given that.
Yeah, but now because of his literally now, even though there are no facilities, those 3 facilities, Tevis has made homelessness criminal.
Yeah,
because they either need to get the fuck out or not rest there or go to one of their shelters.
And what happened was the city, had owned that street because it was a Portland road. It just happened to be in between 2 halves of a park. The city donated that street to Portland Parks and Rec, so that now that street is part of the park and it is illegal to camp there now. And they've completely fenced off the street. They're turning it into, get this, a pickleball court. Thank God, because we need one of those.
Thank you. We're so, it's so awesome. Literally, he needs to shift his focus from building 3 shelters and just start building pickleball courts, because that's clearly what people are wanting to fund nowadays.
Oh, yeah, that's what the public wants.
It's the pickleball courts.
Yeah, I was there trying to help people out along with some others, and, we were trying to help people pack and get moved. We were just giving people notice, like, hey, rapid response is going to be here in like 30 minutes, and people were like, what the fuck, what do you mean? And we were like, I'm sorry. But the thing that's really great about it, the thing that just shows our government at work and our tax dollars at work, is when we approached workers like rapid response, like the construction workers setting up the barricades for the street so that cars can't even drive down it anymore, nobody knew anything. We were like, hey, what's the plan? How long do these people have to move? I don't know. Where are these people supposed to go? I don't know. Do you have anyone we could call who does know? No, I don't know. I don't know who's in charge of that. I'm just here.
Yeah. No, because literally their only goal was to ever be like, yo, put this fence there, or watch these people, push them out.
Yeah, do you have any, like, shelters, any kind of items to help these people? No. Like, there was just...
No, they're not here to help those people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thankfully, we've been keeping tabs on a few of the campers who have obviously been relocated because, the street is entirely fenced off. There's so much shit, so many signs. They've closed, like, the street right next to it to through traffic. It's just nothing there anymore. There was even another camp, which I haven't been to personally, but I've heard, one of pretty substantial size, with members mostly like 60 to 70 years old, that got pretty brutally swept, like you'd never even know they were there one day. So it seems like he's doing it a little backwards. He doesn't have any of these facilities or plots of land or shelters built yet, but he does seem to be recently... he's kind of on the warpath with sweeping. And
I think, honestly, if I could kind of jump off little bit, where I think that the confusion and the absolute of like, well, you're sweeping and you're pushing these people, but you don't have these facilities that you said, but you're basically banning homelessness. And no, like, they can't be on the streets, they can't be here.
I'm pretty sure it's even, I don't know if it passed, but I'm pretty sure it's even banned to, like, sleep outside, homeless or not, in Portland.
Yeah, no, I will say to you...
Sorry to interrupt.
But... No, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that did pass, essentially. That is, like, taken into effect. And you see with fucking, like, his, like, he's trying to, like, almost, like, be a nice guy, but he's acting when in the ways that he wants to act, and what the people who pay his bills and get him elected, and the people he's really obligated to, which is the Portland business like associations and all that stuff, that they want this homelessness fixed. They don't want them on their streets. They don't want them like in the like the places that stop the shoppers from walking to their apartments to their shitty fucking boutique or whatever. And that's it. So that, like, he is solving homelessness, but it's not housing the homeless. It's killing them until they're gone. Mm-hmm. Or we buy them all bus tickets and they could be San Francisco's problem.
Yeah.
Or, like, whatever. I mean, like, literally, I think he's just intensifying it, hoping that, these people either go away forever, they just somehow disappear into thin air, but they're no longer in the city for whatever reason, or they die. Because, let's face it, if all these people die, who the fuck's going to report it? Mm-hmm. Who the fuck's going to say anything? If they all die, probably the only report that's ever going to be out is about, oh, Tevis Wheeler is such a great leader who who led and solved the homeless problem, and now the streets are safe for commerce once again.
Oh yeah, no, it'll be like, ooh, the smell of all these flies around this random corpse here. Ugh, that's such an inconvenience to me.
Well, they'll just sweep it away. They'll get rid of it. They'll make it seem like it never even happened, and it never even occurred.
And I want to share, too, because I feel like if the wrong person were to listen to this, we could be confused of being somewhat dramatic. Not the case, though, because if you think about it, the sweep at Laurelhurst happened, like, just as the weather turned cold. It was a shitty, cold, rainy day. And you get people, particularly anyone with any kind of upper respiratory problems, any kind of abscess, any kind of like...
Basically any medical concern that would
Or
make
not
them
even, really.
Yeah, like, because again,
But-
we're dealing with below 40 degrees temperatures coming up. Daily.
Below 30 coming
like,
up.
you know, it's going to be fucking freezing out there. And just like, those people will have no amenities to be solved with.
And that's the thing, because when they're swept, I don't care what they tell you, their belongings are destroyed. Nobody's able to get to Rapid Response's little storage unit where they just haphazardly throw everyone's shit and get their stuff back. Like, they're never seeing those items again.
No.
And they're taking people's IDs, they're taking shit like people's glasses, their tents, their blankets, their hand warmers, their extra clothes and shoes that they may have. And all of that is gone, so they are just the person with the clothes on their back now, sleeping outside in the cold rain. There is such a high chance that that person will die.
Yeah, and their sickness, and the really fucked up thing is that we'll never fucking know about it. Yep. Because the thing that's going to happen is they're going to see that fucking dead body, someone's going to call the cops, someone's going to come out, get the dead body, put it in a morgue, and then it will be known as John Smith for the rest of life. Yeah. And we'll never fucking know anything about that other than it being a dead fucking corpse in a morgue.
Yeah, no, and like, not to be negative, but that's the fucking situation with these aggressive sweeping.
It's definitely like, it's just showing the true colors of... especially the Wheeler administration here as a mayor, and, you know, even really just, like, the state as a whole, because, I mean, Portland's a big fucking city. This has gotten to such a fucking extent that, honestly, yeah, the Oregon governor should kind of step in and be more prominent in this issue and really, like, you know, try to, you know, fix something, help these people.
Yeah, when in reality, I'm sure it's like, oh, not touching that.
Yeah, no one wants to touch it. No one wants to fucking touch that shit. No one wants to talk about it because they know it's fucking political suicide, because they don't have any other answers other than what Tevis is doing, which is get them the fuck out. Be aggressive with them. Throw cold water on them. Curse them out. Get the nightsticks. Whatever it fucking takes. Scare these people. Get them to not be comfortable, to stick around, and get them the fuck out. Mm-hmm. They'll either die or get the fuck out of the city. That is the plan with Tevis. And I don't give a fuck what he's saying about him going like, oh, I'm going to build 3 facilities. And I'm like, yeah, because we all know how fast Portland, Oregon's, like, infrastructure is. It'd probably take, like, 3 years to even pick a spot on the fucking map. So, like, you know, it's fucking dreadful, and it's fucking horrible, especially that he just kind of gets away with people, like, you know, saying like, well, yeah, but the homeless problem is bad. And it's like, well, yeah, but what's the fucking answer other than just like scare them?
Yeah,
kill
definitely. Them. I mean, as dire as it all sounds, it's something that I kind of relate things back to a lot, which is, you know, put the mutual in mutual aid, be there for people. I like to keep little care packages in my car, so if someone's on the side of the street, I can hand them out. You know, check on people. If you see someone just lying on the side of the road, don't walk by. You know, yeah, they might be like, hey, leave me alone, but that's better than them being dead and you just walking past them, or in medical distress and you just walking past them. So mind your safety, but be there for your neighbor, housed or otherwise.
And also, shameless plug, but it's a good plug nonetheless. I mean, Merlin has Accessible Wellness Project, which will be linked down below. It's basically a nonprofit that helps to get resources out to folks who need them, and especially this coming winter. I'm sure Merlin would appreciate any donations that anyone is willing to give and help the people who really do need help, especially in this time of year when it's not going to get easier.
Yeah. But blankets, hand warmers, and rain ponchos are on the wish list.
Yeah. So if you have the heart and the means, and you want to give back to some people who really need it, check that out. It's all above board. We do really good. Well, he does really great work there. And, yeah. So, without further ado, let's move on from this fucking infuriating, depressing topic to an even more infuriating and depressing topic.
Yeah.
Alright, so another little piece of news, and I kind of wanted to cover it because I to close out this episode, because I do think it's an interesting topic. Not necessarily the bill, it's the bill itself or whatever. We'll cover it and we'll talk about it, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the bigger picture as far as the relationship between being a leftist and gun rights. Basically, what happened here in Portland is we had one measure that was on the ballot, and it was called 114. And it was essentially pitched in all of the commercials as this was a way to stop, in particular in Portland, all this outrageous gun violence, to put a hard stance against it. And it was supposed to be like basically this measure that people, if you wanted strong gun rights to finally be in Oregon, this is the bill you need to. And literally there's a commercial, very heartfelt, of I guess like a sister of someone who was a victim of gun violence, and literally her telling her story. It was very emotional, and that kind of became the viral pitch of the amendment, and it passed. But, you know, despite the emotional sentiments behind it, and I'm sure the people, you know, not undermining that sister, I'm sure her story is very horrible and awful, and I have full sympathy towards her, and I'm not a supporter of gun violence, of course, but we're pretty pissed off as anarchists in particular, what this measure does. So I guess do you want to tell us a little bit about it, or do you want me to tell, like?
I'll talk a little bit about it, and if I'm sounding stupid, jump in.
I will. You'll cut.
Yeah. So, you know, it does all the usual proposed stuff. It requires fees, it requires safety training, it requires permits, all good stuff, right? Except guess who handles all of it?
It's the police department. You said, like, get permits, because that's one thing. To get a gun for a permit, that's one thing. This means it makes you have to get a permit from the police department so you can then go and get a permit for a gun. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it basically implemented a second permit system.
Not without training and fees.
Yeah, and you also have to get, like, constant training, and guess who does the training, and you know, like, guess where you're going to have to go to get your training and all that shit. It's at the police department, and better hope to God you're not in any way affiliated with, like, the Socialist Rifle Association or anything like that, because essentially this is a measure that does a good thing, which I think is gun control in this country, which I think this country desperately needs, but then does a complete wrong turn by saying, oh, you know who should be in charge of gun rights? The fucking wackadoodles at the fucking police department, who are the biggest, like, fucking Nazi, fucking, like, mouth-breathing gun nuts you can find.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing, like, the whole reason I heard about it at first, like, way before the midterms, was when, you know, a friend of mine mentioned how they were arrested for doing some medic stuff at one of the protests, and even though, like, they never got fully charged and all of that stuff, like, they definitely pretty much could not acquire a gun because the police know them and they know that they're a leftist, and it's like, what's the fucking point of even trying at that point? And yeah. God forbid if you're any kind of visible minority.
And I mean, the measure just passed, and I will say, like, it's pretty, like, other than saying, like, you know, the general plan and who would be in facilitating that, which would be in part with the police department of Portland, or not Portland, but, you know, the police bureau, wherever you're trying to get a gun, I assume. But, like, so we're still going to have to see, like, how far involved they are with, like, you know, do they run, like, when you say background checks, does that take in consideration political affiliations? And if based off of that, can you get denied off of some other stuff? Like, you know, like, there's just, like, a big question mark over all of this. And and there was a really fucked up story I kind of read about online where, you know, there was a local chapter of the SRA that I follow on Twitter, and apparently one of their friends is facing a potential of like 1 year charge because they have a high capacity Magnum like cartridge, which was banned alongside with 114. And that they don't have a receipt of them buying it back in 5 years ago or whatever, and so now they can't prove that they bought that after the thing, so they're facing a potential of 1 year in jail. So again, this is just like clearly saying like, okay, who's this going to affect? And who the fuck's going to not be affected by this? And it seems proportionately that it's going to affect, I think at least, minorities who may need a gun to protect themselves or, against other violence. Because again, hey, we're in Oregon, baby, and this is Proud Boy Central. And there's plenty of fucking instances where these fucking nut jobs are patrolling the streets and trying to fucking cause shit and kill people.
No, let's not forget the shooting at that march that hadn't even started yet last spring, or the email that went out about Proud Boys threatening to do mass shootings at some businesses on election night. Mm-hmm. And, you could hear this stuff and be like, oh, well, this is just more examples of why we need gun control. And, to an extent, yes, and I know you were kind of leading into, the grander question of leftism and gun rights and gun control. Personally, gun control in theory, I don't think anyone with no kind of permission or anything should go out and be able to buy something capable of killing hundreds of people in a minute.
If we have a marketplace that literally sells, loaded death guns, there should probably be a little bit of some, some mediation of who's getting these things,
however,
where are they going.
However, as an anarchist, I do not trust any state organization to be unbiased in its selection of who gets a gun. Mm-hmm. So there's that problem.
I view my anarchism as a little bit more different, as I don't innately oppose bureaucracy. I just am an advocate usually against it. And I think especially if we're in the context of right now, we're in this big ass country. We are under capitalism where we can just sell anything and buy anything we want. And we also happen to have fucking factories who sell guns and brands who sell guns, and that's their thing. So in that context, I do kind of want to make sure that hey, there's this guy trying to buy a semi-automatic rifle and a shit ton of rounds. That should be a little eye-raising, and I do think there should be some mechanics to basically identify that, get some eyebrows raised, some red flags waving, and then potentially stop something a shooting which happens every fucking day in this country.
Yeah.
So I definitely think I do think in that context there's definitely needs to be some control, and some fucking nut jobs, and me included to a certain degree for a while, my belief was just get rid of them. Just get rid of them all and just be like Australia. Just go be a bunch of, guys who get really angry because of one's shooting, and then they just all throw their guns in the giant pile and set it on fire. That's what we should do. And, that opinion has definitely evolved as time has gone on. And especially as I kind of got less liberal and more leftist in my philosophy. There's definitely a need for firearms. Probably the most apparent example would just be in this country, minorities are often targeted by hate groups, and I do think in a certain degree that there would be a really those minority communities would be really well advised in building communal defense, and you can only really do that in the modern context if you get a shit ton of guns and you learn how to use those guns and defend yourself. And I just look at these measures as just why are we going to give the people who have fucked up everything, just constantly keep fucking up everything, the police department of this entire country, tell them okay, here's another thing that you're gonna fuck up. you're gonna make sure that all the guns go to the wrong places. Yeah. And you're going to make sure all the guns that we don't want to, they're going to not get.
Well, what it is, I think, Measure 114 is really just a shallow like pathetic little way to sneak more funding into the police because
It could be, honestly, yeah.
They're like, oh, they don't want us to like fund the police because George Floyd, police bad, but if we have the excuse of, oh, they've got the gun regulating department now, let's give them so much fucking money for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there will definitely, I mean, I'm assuming, especially if they're going to be in charge of it, there's going to be needing, like, they're going to have in good reign to be like, well, we need more funding.
Yeah.
We need more space or whatever.
So
and,
we
like,
can go and build our fucking, like, deforestation training camps where we learn how to target minorities.
Yeah, we gotta build the urban death camp.
Yeah.
I mean, I laughed. Well, I didn't laugh, but I was so disturbed when I saw that, like, in Texas they were building like urban fucking war zones for like their local police department.
Yeah.
Just seeing some fat fucking hog like scoot around that fucking place. I do agree with you that like it's half-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really just not going to, like, you know, I think honestly, if you really wanted to be ambitious, I don't know if it would ever pass, but you know, if they were going to do something along those lines, that it would just be a separate government entity that, like, or, you know, a separate entity entirely that is in no way involved with the police department, that does these checks and makes these calls, so we can at least have a better understanding of, like, their autonomy as an as an institution.
Or even better than that, I would consider more of like a jury of peers. Like jury duty, but you decide whether or not somebody gets a gun.
Whatever the solution, I definitely don't think it should be like, let's just give it to one of this institution that is like rotten to the fucking core.
Oh yeah, no. And guns have one purpose, and that is to kill, which is generally, especially in the context of human against human, not a good thing. However, as a great song title once said, trans girls need guns. And I understand, because, you know, it's also a very emotional topic.
Oh yeah, I mean, because, you know, in the context of mass shootings, which is like the biggest problem with gun violence in this country.
Yeah.
Like, how the fuck do we stop that? Like, how do we stop a motherfucker to go into school and just unloading like a full clip? Like, what's wrong with that? What happens? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, and, like, how do you explain to your, like, language arts teacher who survived a school shooting before she worked at your school, how do you explain to her anything other than total, complete gun regulation? You know, it's such a traumatic memory, I'm sure, in situations like that. Like, who the hell would advocate for anyone having a gun?
Those people who especially have gone through, like, gun violence, and especially, like, in those extreme instances with, like, shootings and stuff like that, they're completely, like, they're valid in their own right of being like, oh, I am scared of guns because of this, like, very serious traumatic experience that faced after me. It's all just, like, in that specific situation, and my heart goes out to you, but, you know, I also think it's pretty fucked up when lynchings happen, and I think, like, the only way to completely solve that isn't just tell them to stop, it's make an example of them.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, with lynchings, like, you're not gonna ban rope. Like, that, because that wouldn't fix it. Like, at the end of the day, I feel like the problem isn't inherently guns. Like, again, there are some examples where I'm like, okay, what the fuck do you need a machine like that for? Other than to kill lots of people.
Well, there's definitely, like, this problem is multifaceted, just like a lot of problems.
No, and it's like, the problem is, in my eyes, the fucking crazy, you know, unchecked mental health and unchecked, like, weird conservative manifestos where they're like, I'm gonna shoot every trans person who crosses my path, or every black person, or like whatever, and it's just the fact that these people are emboldened by each other in their own echo chambers with nobody, like, stopping
and constantly
them.
Martyring themselves after one of them does something.
And someone on YouTube made a really good comment on this, and it's semi-related, but of, you know, the whole joke meme culture leading to, like, real-world violence because it's ironic until it's not anymore.
Well, yeah, and there's definitely, like, right-wing groups who use that, like, ironic internet humor to basically, like, push their message and get people indoctrinated. I mean, this is very well documented at this point.
I feel like taking guns off the streets like, hypothetically, say you even managed to do it completely, even the illegal ones, like, just nobody owns a gun anymore.
Well, you know, you do something like the UK, you do something like Australia.
Yeah, and, like, I feel like that isn't going to stop these crazy freaks from, like, being themselves and hurting people. It'll add an obstacle, but...
The whole hypothetical of let's just ban all the guns in America. I mean, like, we couldn't solve a fucking pandemic.
Oh, yeah, no. Like, good fucking luck.
We couldn't launch a fucking website to give you health care.
Yeah.
Like, this country is completely inept as far as, like, having the capabilities of making huge legislative, like, accomplishments. And the mere audacity of even thinking that the country where there are 10 guns for every one person, that this government's just going to be like, yep, this is the one time we did something good and we worked it out and we fixed it. Like, it would never work. It just would never work on so many fucking levels. And, like, you know, even past that, I mean, like, again, going back to the point of, like, it's a multifaceted problem.
Yeah.
It's not just the guns. Yes, there is a little bit of a problem of having a gun industry that sells domestically, and its whole thing is, like, we gotta make the baddest, deadliest fucking weapon of all the time. Like, that's a little fucked up. There's also the problem of culture a little bit. Not that one I would put a little bit lower on the totem pole, but there's definitely, like, a culture of violence in America, and I would almost argue even amongst, like, especially right-wing politics in America, it's kind of...
I'd agree with you.
It's a death cult. It's just a big old giant death cult that they just want mayhem and destruction. So there's a part of that.
Yeah,
and
nobody can fuck with me. I have my gun.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of that. And I mean, there's just, like, you know, like you were saying, there is a fucking mental health crisis in this country. The people are more and more lonely. They're more and more isolated. They're more and more just, like, pushed to the most utter extremes because their only friends are a couple of fucking mouth-breathing psychos on 4chan or
yeah,
whatever.
And they're living under a capitalistic society that bases them only off of how much money they can produce for somebody else.
I mean, again, like, just about every problem in America, this is not an easy topic, and it's not something that can be just easily said as, like, well, the problem is... It's something that requires a conversation, and it requires a discussion, and it requires a look at context. Because while, yes, you have people like, you know, Kyle Rittenhouse who use guns to be destructive and enforce the white supremacist regime that we all live under, there is just as much people who are disenfranchised by the system, and their only possible way of protecting and defending themselves and continuing their life and, like, in their pursuit of happiness is with protection, is with a firearm.
Honestly, I feel like the best way to sum it up, and not to make, like, a moral story out of a tragic real-life event that happened literally, like, less than 2 years ago here, but... the shooting at the march that I mentioned, I don't remember how many people he injured and how many people he killed, but it was enough. His shooting, when he just opened fire on these, like, protesters, only stopped because one of the protesters shot him. So I think that just really shows, like, the double-sidedness of it, of, like, yeah... the gun caused the problem, but it also fucking fixed the problem real fast.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, I hate to sound like the fucking NRA, but, like, it is a fucking tool.
Yeah.
The gun is a tool.
Not
like,
fix the problem, but anyway, you know what I mean.
But it defended them, and it caused potential less mayhem than it could have been if no one fucking had anything.
Yeah.
The only thing I have to say to people who may feel impassioned by the appeals of let's strengthen gun regulation, and especially gun regulation that falls under the line of, like, our current 114, that move is it's benefiting the wrong people.
Yeah.
It's not helping the people that you really think are going to help, and it's just gun regulation inherently is not a good thing. Not inherently, especially under this context of just letting the police department take over and do what they want and you know, just muck it up like they've always fucking done. Was there definitely a time in your life where you were, like, someone who was kind of sympathetic to, like, yeah, just get rid of them all?
My belief went from Well, I do like the idea of making them illegal, but I feel like the bad guys, quote unquote, will just get them illegally, so then what's the point? To, oh shit, maybe there's actually a benefit to guns because the Nazis have them, and there's no doubt about that, so maybe the leftists should too.
Leftists, like always, love writing theories and books, and the fucking literature on like leftists and gun rights and the right and the need to have guns, or the education of teaching people how to use a firearm, is extensive. It's out there. Look at my boys over at the SRA. They're good guys. They release some literature about the stuff, and I highly encourage anyone to read it. But yeah, basically, to sum up, fuck Measure 114, fuck the police, ACAB to the day I fucking die, and I want my guns, goddammit. I want my fucking guns, you piggy.
Also, I highly recommend checking out the people who run the group called Pink Pistols. I've been to their site a couple times. I haven't really done anything with them though, but I've heard many people vouch for them. They are a kind of queer gun group that does trainings and stuff like that for queer people, since obviously that can be a very queer-phobic space in the gun fans.
Yeah.
I recommend checking them out if you are interested in trying to acquire a firearm for yourself or learn how to use one or anything like that.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode, slam-packed with some awesome, delicious, juicy content for your sweet little selves to enjoy. Yeah, down below you can see all of our links to our various stuff, both of our Instagrams where we do stuff, so check us out on there, follow us. But we also have gay programming on Instagram where you can get updated on all the new episodes and laugh your little butt off of some queer memes. So check that out if you're into that kind of stuff. Like I said before, AWP is down there, so if you want to donate, check it out down there. Merlin's also got a book. You got anything else to pitch or anything else you want to say?
Nope.
That's great. So yeah, we'll see you again real soon. You better check us out, because we're going to be popping up a little bit more often than you think. So I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye. Promise. Pinky swear. Bye.
Bye.
What did the